Hi, Alan here, Our History, Your Story. Now today I've got a tale for you. I'm going to tell you all about the Great Fire of Edinburgh and James Braidwood, the founder of the first Municipal Fire Brigade that was based here in Edinburgh. Now, we're here in West Parliament Square. It's spacious, it's picturesque, and with St Giles just over there, pretty beautiful. But Edinburgh hasn't always been like this. Now back in the day, there used to be high tenements, sometimes 14 stories high, sometimes poorly constructed. Now, commercial and residential interlaced. Chemicals and supplies, again, mixed up, disposed of willy-nilly, just thrown in the gutters or thrown down the closes. So all this amounted to a fire hazard, as well as the fact that the people of Edinburgh often left their fires burning overnight. Now you can understand the reason for this. It's quite hard to start a fire, especially first thing in the morning. But all this amounted to a fire hazard, which resulted in a number of fires occurring. Now, there was a number of devastating fires in Edinburgh, but there were fire brigades before the Municipal Fire Brigade was started. But these fire brigades were run as private enterprises, and they were run by the insurers. Now what would happen is these insurers would give you a metal plaque, you'd stick it on the front of your house, and should a fire occur, the insurers would come, put out the fire, and if they couldn't, they would help rescue your assets, and hopefully your loved ones. But there was a problem with this. Now there was a number of competing insurers, and what would happen is if the buildings were beside each other, both of them on fire, the companies would often fight each other. Honestly, you could make this stuff up. And there was occasions where they wouldn't be able to fight the fire because they'd be fighting in the street. Another problem with this is, as they were competing, and the city didn't have very much water supply at that time, they would compete for the watercocks and the water supply. So a lot of this resulted in fires happening, in big disasters. Now, because the city was so compact together, this wasn't just a problem for the few, it was a problem for everyone, so the city had to act. Now, if any of these fires occurred, it could be disastrous for the whole area. Whole blocks of the city could be destroyed. And a fire occurred here near St Giles, which is just behind you, and the Exchequer. So it was decided in August 1824 that the first Municipal Fire Brigade would be established, and it would be headed by the Fire Master James Braidwood. But who was this Master of Fire, James Braidwood, that was going to be in charge of 80 firefighters? Now, he was only 24 years old, so he must have been something special. Now, he was educated at the Royal High, he was the 10th child of a cabinet maker, and his trade or vocation was that of a surveyor. So he was an ideal candidate to know exactly how buildings would react to fire and stresses and strains. Now, James Braidwood came up with some good ideas for hiring firefighters. Now, he decided that he'd hire joiners and masons for knowing the structure of the building and how the building will react. He hired roofers for their nimbleness of feet and their head for heights, and he hired general labourers just for their sheer strength and force. You're lugging big equipment, you're holding hoses that are all greased up, so these are the men that he hired. On the 16th of November 1824, the honeymoon was over for the Municipal Fire Brigade of Edinburgh. The Great Fire of Edinburgh had erupted, and a literal baptism of fire lay before them. Now, a fire was reported just over there at one of the tenements. It was reported at 10 p.m, but because the site had limited watercocks, water supplies, they had trouble finding them. So firefighting didn't begin till 11 p.m, by which point the fire had already taken 4 tenements. The fire was advancing through the high street, taking out all that lay in its way, and eventually it seized the Tron Kirk, which stands behind me. It seized the Tron Kirk, and the bell tower came crashing down. And it was advancing in another direction, and it destroyed most of Parliament Square, where I was standing earlier. People worried that the whole town would be destroyed by this fire. Now, the brigades, along with a force from the castle, were fighting the fire, but to no avail. But their salvation came on the morning of the 19th, when a huge downpour put the fire out. Now, after this, there was an inquiry, and a lot of lessons were learned from the fire. Now, the Municipal Fire Brigade had done their best, but they'd been troubled because the people from the City Council had issued contravening commands. So different people at different parts were saying, do this, do that, and there wasn't a coherent force that was being aimed at tackling the fire. Now, the city decided that it would, one, increase the water supply, because this had been a problem, and they passed a law that said that the fire marshal, or the master of fire, and his men were in charge, and that no one could contravene their orders. Now, James Braidwood was a fantastic master of fire. He came up with so many great ideas. Now, some of these were quite practical. Do you know, all fire stations were uphill to aid with the speed and get into fires, right? But how do you slow yourself down? Well, this is what he told his men. You just turn right, and turn right until your momentum is dissipated, and then you'll come to a complete stop. Do you know what I mean? Pretty practical ideas. But he also came up with a lot of the first training manuals. He helped develop the first fire engines and training regimes as well. So he was a pretty spectacular guy. Now, James Braidwood's talent and ability had not gone unnoticed, and in 1833 he left Edinburgh to become the first director of fire for the City of London. A very prestigious position, one that reflected his talents and abilities. Now, he died tragically in 1861 fighting a fire near London Bridge. Now, his memory and legacy continues in the firefighters of today. Now, the equipment's got better, undoubtedly, but their commitment to bravery and excellence continues. Now, this has been Our History, Your Story. I've been Alan, and this has been the Great Fire of Edinburgh and the life of James Braidwood. Please like and subscribe, and join me on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and I'll see you next time.